Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Vader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to catch up with Renata Morgan. She is the president of Rheem Northeast Distribution. And, it's a very interesting way that the Rheem independent distribution all kind of came together. Rheem obviously is a big manufacturer. For those of you not in the HVAC business, it's an equipment manufacturer, long-standing, great reputation organization. And back in 2020, they got into what I would call vertical integration. They started to acquire independent distributors. And they took an interesting approach, as Renata will share. They did not go in and impose their will. They actually let distributors do what they do best. And I think that was probably key to the success. So she, thrived under that early acquisition, and then ultimately was part of a much grander acquisition plan and relocated into the Northeast. But she and I had some great conversations just around that and the challenges around culture, but then really got into the people and started to talk a little bit about how do we capture data sets of this tribal knowledge that people have stuck between their ears. And we hope that there's AI solutions because, of course, you know me, I love my AI. But there are solutions to try to bring some of that information into a data set that can be redeployed, taught, and shared with other people in the organization. So anyhow, fascinating conversation with her. Really, truly enjoyed it, and I hope you do too. About 18 months ago, a guy reached out to me who happened to live right here in my hometown. He wanted to show me a product. I almost didn't take the meeting, and I'm sure glad I did. His name is Justin Johnson, and his company is called Motivate. What he showed me was an AI-powered solution that tackles one of the biggest time drains in manufacturing and distribution companies: the hours your team spends just processing orders and quotes coming in by email and text. But here's the part that really got my attention. Instead of cutting headcount to justify the investment, Motivate redirects that recovered time into revenue-generating activity. Your people stay. They just get a whole lot more productive. Head over to gomotivate.com to schedule your demo and tell them Jason sent you. As an added bonus, Distribution Talk listeners get 50% off installation. All right. Hey, Renata, welcome to Distribution Talk. Thank you for taking the time to be with me today.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
My pleasure. And I'm glad we finally got together. I know it was a little dicey, but we finally made it happen. And so this is really a nice treat for me to finally get to learn a little bit about you and your organization. But if you wouldn't mind, could you share a little bit about how you got involved with distribution, why you like distribution, or maybe you hate it, and why you're still here?
Sure, gladly. So, interesting story. It involves golf and a bar, as is pretty common in the industry. Good place to
start. So, there you go.
My last semester of college, I was bartending at a golf club. And the president of Century AC at the time, Rick Luke, was a member there and would come in and chat with me as I was serving drinks. And he asked me to send him my resume. I mentioned that I was graduating and looking for a job. Mm-hmm. I interviewed with them. And honestly, it was interesting. It was an industry I had never heard of before. They had to spell out what HVAC stood for me.
Good.
And, originally, I honestly thought just coming out of college, this will be good to get my feet wet, maybe a springboard to something else down the road. But the culture at Century was so phenomenal that they kept me there for 15 years. And in that time, I was able to take on, progressively larger roles. I was also able to get my master's in industrial distribution from Texas A&M in my time there. And with that, additional opportunities opened up for me, which I was fortunate enough to be able to pursue, with the support of all of the mentors along the way. So moved up to the Philadelphia area and have been the president of Rheem Northeast Distribution since January of 2024. And, along the way in the almost 20 years I've been in this industry, I have been very fortunate to be involved in a lot of industry organizations between Hardy, Blue Hawk, as well as some others. Those have been very fundamental, honestly, in my career and some of the
Hmm.
opportunities I've been able to take advantage of because of the power of the network that these industry organizations provide. So I'm about
Yeah.
20 years in now and still enjoying every moment of it.
No, that's great. No, that's fantastic. So tell me, what was your favorite job growing up? Kind of coming up in that business. Right out. That's pretty funny, actually. It's an interesting entry. I haven't had that one yet. That's the new. That's a unique entry into the business. But what was your favorite job growing up?
Oh man, it's hard to pick just one. I've had so
Okay.
much fun in so many areas. And if you look at my, LinkedIn profile,
Hmm.
and some of the titles I've had, some of them are very different and, almost seem, fake. Like I was director of marketing and IT at one point. And in my last role at Century, I was the general manager of business administration. So people were like, what does that really mean? And honestly, I was responsible for a lot of the admin, shared services
Sure.
departments, if you
Sure.
will, that kind of connected all the regions of the company. So I really enjoyed learning in
Hmm.
each of those
Okay.
roles,
Okay.
right? I enjoy learning just, personally. So being able to get professional exposure to numerous different areas of the
Hmm.
business throughout that journey was just paramount. I mean, you understand more of that full 360-degree picture of everything that's going on in a business when you're allowed to take those deep dives into specific areas of the business. So I really couldn't pick just one,
Okay.
but I will say I had a lot of fun along the way. And even, back in the old days, a couple decades ago, it was a very different industry than it is
Yeah.
today. So, the way we did things then versus the way we do things now look pretty different. And,
Hmm.
telling some stories from some of the earlier years of my career, for people that are new to the industry, they're like, wow, things really have changed. It used to be a little more
Oh,
informal.
absolutely. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I started, when I was 13 years old. That's over 40 years ago. And yes, there was a lot of different things going on. It was funny. I was watching something the other night and they had a dot matrix printer. And, it's screaming across, making sound across. And, my 18-year-old's looking at me like, what is that thing? And it kind of dawned on me like that, then fax machines, all this technology changes, very different ways of doing business.
Yeah, and we had dot matrix printers when I first started, to
Yeah.
give you
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
a frame of reference for,
Yeah.
just the technology evolution that we've
Sure.
experienced. It's been phenomenal.
No, it is a lot of fun. And, my favorite has always been, I loved driving trucks. It was a truck driver. I loved delivering product. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I had so much fun doing that. A lot of freedom associated with that, a lot of responsibility. No, it was one of the greatest jobs ever at least my opinion is one of the greatest jobs in distribution out there. So, should not ever be underrated. So,
Not at all. I mean, they're the face of our company for many of our
absolutely.
customers, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and I did my best to ruin that reputation as much as possible. So no, oh, it was fun though. I really did enjoy it, But then all of a sudden, I decided, oh, what a great idea to manage people. And then that's when it was like, oh man, what did I do? That truck was awful nice. Just had to manage my time. So speaking of people management, you've been involved in some pretty unusual changes, in the way from Century. I'm going to let you go into the story, but just unusual, I would say, acquisition activity, but also carving out and spin-off activity, all these other things. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of just tell the story of how that whole thing worked and how Rheem really played a part in that.
Sure. So back in 2020, when the whole world was shutting down from COVID,
Right.
Rheem was actually finalizing their first investment into independent distribution, and that was with Century AC and Air Management Supply, who were sister companies, and I was working for both at the time. So
Okay.
there was a lot of panic and anxiety just in the world, right, around this
Hmm.
new novel thing that
Absolutely.
none of us had ever experienced. There
Yeah.
was no precedent, no formula for anyone to follow, and there was a lot of people concerned about losing their jobs, and
Hmm.
ultimately many did. And I feel so fortunate to have been in that position at that time because Dennis Bearden, he was the owner and founder of Century AC. He treated his employees very well in
Hmm.
that sale. So we were able to announce that at the end of March and really maintain what we had been doing and continue down that course with Rheem's investment in the business. And I sincerely appreciated their approach too, and that they bought distribution and let distributors run distribution.
Right. No, that's a good solid. I mean, that's a great way, because let's face it, most manufacturers have no idea how to be distributors. I mean, two different agendas.
Very, absolutely. And, there have been a lot of different forays into factory distribution. There have been a lot of different flavors of that in our industry and different approaches. So I really appreciate, the mindset they had in this whole pursuit, because it has been very beneficial for us and created a lot of mutual understanding that a different approach would not have allowed to emerge, if you will. So really that collaboration and understanding has been phenomenal.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I've seen it, obviously in HVAC. I mean, with, Daikin, acquiring, they've acquired at least Williams. I'm trying to think of other companies they've acquired, but Daikin's done this. And so has, what's the one in Florida? It's killing me here.
Watsco?
Carrier. Yeah, Carrier Enterprises. They kind of had their separate distribution arm. And so, but I don't think they required anybody to get there, but I think they just decided to play distributor and see how that went. So,
yeah, it's certainly been interesting. And then with that, Rheem, of course, made additional investments and bought a group of 4 distributors and that had, different leadership that was running the business up until I joined in 2024. And that has been very interesting to see. Coming in as, I would describe myself as an inside outsider. So I was inside the industry, inside a Rheem distributor already, but I was an outsider to these 4 businesses. So I was able to come in with that objective, fresh set of eyes, if you will, and really dig into some of the foundational things that need to happen when you're acquiring companies and then merging them together. There are certain things that just can't be overlooked or under prioritized.
Okay. Very diplomatic words there. Is there anything that, that stands out? Just that you're like, you got to be kidding me. That moment when you looked at these and said, oof, yeah, that one's probably on my priority list to change.
Yeah, there have certainly been a lot of those, but also I have a lot of empathy because I've grown up in distribution, if you will. I've been that person that was wearing 5 different hats and performing roles for 5 different departments across the company. So we tend to run very lean in distribution, right? There is not excess headcount or, people standing by idly. We always have something to do. So when I got up to the Northeast and arrived here, we had a lot of the old way, if you will. We had a lot of people wearing multiple hats because that's what they had to do to keep their companies moving forward. But now, as part of a larger organization, we can narrow the focus of some of those roles. So people that were working in both purchasing and operations, they could choose a lane and really focus on that lane and focus on executing well rather than being spread too thin and trying to be everything for everyone. That has limits. People burn out when that's the expectation.
So it's exhausting. Absolutely exhausting.
I'm grateful that that larger team is allowing for some of that, more narrow focus. And hopefully, people are feeling some of that weight lifted off their shoulders where, formerly they did have to juggle many more things simultaneously.
And I think there's a balance, there's some fear, obviously, when another entity comes in and is, acquiring your company and bringing you in, there's fear. And then maybe there is relief. That would be the ideal outcome or the ideal, product of that. But sometimes people don't make it. They can't get past the cultural shift, I think.
Yes, and that's real. It happens. That we typically see. Just speaking generally about the mergers and acquisitions space, you typically see fairly high attrition, right? With previous staff. But there's so much tribal knowledge in our industry that is so important, and so many customer relationships that are rooted in the people we have and the knowledge that they bring, the experience that they bring to the table. That one of my focuses was really, let's take a slow and steady pace to change. Let's explain to people the reason for the change, the why behind it, how it benefits them. But let's also be real. Not everything is going to be beneficial. There may be some drawbacks, right? But let's be transparent about it and speak to people about it and give them the opportunity to ask questions. So I was very heavily focused on, the culture piece, getting it right, understanding the lay of the land before I came in and started making a bunch of changes, because a lot of these companies did some really great things. They were all successfully independent. So the big question is, how do we create a new whole that's greater than the sum of its parts?
Right. Right.
And, it's certainly a road, it's not something that happens overnight. We're still on that evolutionary path, but we have been very successful in retaining people and even promoting from within. We've seen a lot of growth with our employee base as part of this new larger organization. And then, Rheem and even the Rheem Air Distribution parent group bring a lot of additional resources to the table that any of these companies individually would have a significantly more challenging time getting on their own.
For sure. Oh, 100%. And I think that also this is one of the knocks, of private equity, for example. One of the knocks, is that they get pushed hard. They're looking for certain net profit objectives, and then there's a secondary look at that. It's like, well, wait a minute. You're being pushed hard. And maybe you weren't pushed as hard previously under an independent owner. And as well as I do, being around this, that there are a lot of lifestyle businesses, a lot of folks that, just kind of, they do really well and they do enough to put their kids through college or whatever and take care of the people that are with them, but they're not pushed. And so it's really that, their success is really dependent upon, the economic conditions. They are in a sailboat waiting for wind rather than a powerboat applying power. I mean, and so it's a different thing. And I do appreciate that about either an entity, like Rheem coming in, or, an outside party saying, I think you all can do better. And I think we need to push to do better.
Absolutely. And we can, right? Not that there was complacency everywhere, but there are certainly people in their comfort zone, right? And when we hired our operations leader, a quote she says all the time is, high tides rise all ships, right?
Yes. Yeah.
The tide is rising, not just for the company, the industry as a whole. You mentioned private equity coming in. That is, I will call it a disruptive force that it is changing the landscape. It's changing how distributors operate. It's changing how really everyone in the channel operates. And the norm and the way things always used to be is changing whether we like it or not. Right? So are we going to rise with the tide, or are we going to let, the anchor of the way we always used to do things hold us down and prevent us from rising and changing with the times? So it's a constant conversation we're having here. And, you hear a lot of people saying, well, back in the old days, we used to do this, we used to do that. And those companies just don't really exist anymore. Right. They're either evolving and growing with the times, or, they're on their way out. So it's unfortunate that, we have a lot of people that have had this 30, 40 year tenure in the industry, and the only constant really is change. So it's a fine line that we walk in trying to balance that.
This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I say distribution-based because that's important. Many alternatives out there say they do distribution, but they really aren't very good at it. They're generally watered-down manufacturing packages with a few distribution features tacked on. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. Those who want to hold on to previous ideals and previous methods and wax nostalgic about those and the good old days and all of this. And you had mentioned Blue Hawk, they're a cooperative. And I recently saw a cooperative that my family was one of the founding members of, and this thing, is 30 plus years old, 36 years old, fold about 2 weeks ago. It was as a direct result of some of that hanging on to old ideals, things that got them started and got them going, but were not sustainable.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those lessons. I mean, it's an incredibly sad event, but it's also a very good lesson that you cannot, ignore the changing tide. You cannot ignore that because you may be swamped.
Exactly. Yeah. And there is a lot of value in the history and understanding the legacy
Sure,
and what are
sure.
the elements that made them successful. Let's
Absolutely.
retain that, but also let's evolve. Let's
Have
introduce some
to.
technology to push us forward.
Have to. Yeah. Speaking of technology, I always love this around integrations, especially what you've had to do. I mean, I'm suspecting that you all were not all in the same ERPs and you had to do a little bit of playing around there.
Correct. Absolutely. So most of those ERP changes, in terms of the companies that were acquired, getting into the same instance of an ERP happened prior to my time. So
Okay.
we did get everybody within the Rheem Northeast Distribution umbrella into Profit21. So we are an Epicor customer.
I'm an old Profit kid myself. Yeah. I grew up all around that. So,
Yeah.
yes, very familiar.
They all were put into one system, but a lot of the data work didn't necessarily happen. So
Mhm.
from an efficiency and an analytics standpoint, left a lot of room for improvement. So we
Mhm.
did finally consolidate all of those company IDs. We're still in one single instance at R&D, but we consolidated them into a single company ID, which makes
Okay.
everything just so much easier. But there's still a lot of data work to go, right? And I think
Yeah.
with the advent of AI and it becoming much more capable, we've been talking about it for 10 years,
Yes.
but its relevance to our business has never been higher than it is now. And
100%. Yeah.
unfortunately, the data is lacking in many organizations, right?
Yeah.
Your AI model is only good as the data that's feeding it. So that's
Mhm.
something that I've been focused on for quite some time. And if you talk to some of my old friends at Century, they'd be like, "Yep, data's another soapbox Renata likes to get on," because I'm so
Yeah,
passionate about it. It
for
is so
sure.
powerful. It's the new currency. If we can get that right, then, there's so many additional capabilities that get unlocked as a result.
I could not agree more. I am a self-professed data junkie, and I was a data junkie first, and now I'm an AI junkie. And so this is my world. I absolutely love this. And I'm actually so crazy. I'm beginning to speak on it now. I'm giving my, 1 hour, 55 minutes of my opinion and where I think these folks are going. And I think it's fascinating. One of the things you had mentioned earlier is that there's a lot of tribal knowledge in all of these organizations. And I think that's one of the bigger challenges that when you're acquiring organizations and that natural attrition is going to happen, well, unfortunately, that tribal knowledge is sitting between somebody's ears. And that is a tremendous drain of resources. It's just like you've lost this wonderful data set. I mean, I hate to put it in a more clinical term, but you've lost this wonderful data set. And so I think the question and the challenge for companies today is how do we make sure that we do capture that data inside of the people that are the backbone of these organizations before they decide, because eventually they want to retire. Eventually they do want to age out of these organizations. And we are seeing a mass age out. This is happening at this point. How do you capture that data? Is that something that you all have been working on?
It's certainly something I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Okay, fair enough. That'll keep you awake at night.
So
Sure.
as far
Okay.
as, actions
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
lacking in some areas, but it's hard, right? It's not like we have a chip that we can implant and just download all of that knowledge.
100%. Yeah.
That of course would be so much easier, but a lot of it comes from experience.
For
I
sure.
mean, even time on the counter, you could work the counter for a year or 2 years and still not encounter every
Right.
situation or every question that you're going to need to be able to answer. So I think one of the solutions, and there's many out
Yes.
there, is mentorship,
Oh,
right?
yeah. There you go.
Taking the new
Yeah.
hires, making sure they have some formal mentoring relationships and opportunities to ask questions and get that knowledge out of their brains. We've also had some people that were gracious enough to spend their time documenting, trying to take, you're never going to get it all. You're probably not even going to get 50% of
No.
everything. We always say,
Nope.
so and so has forgotten more than I've ever learned in this industry, right? So, but how much can you capture? How much can you systemize? How much can you get on paper? And then take that to other people with
Mhm.
tribal knowledge. And eventually you start adding more data points to this, sphere
Yeah.
and getting a full understanding. But
Right.
it's a big challenge. And if I had a solution, I would have sold it and retired already, Jason.
I truly agree with you there. I talk about this often with people, talk about what could be done. And there was one company that shared a couple of unique ideas. I thought that there's a planned retirement. We know that they are going to be going is using AI and AI agents to really monitor and listen to that person as they're interacting throughout the day. And now you're gathering data, how they handle situations and whatnot, and then plugging that in. And it's a little creepy. Okay, I'm just going to tell you right now, it's a little creepy, but I think it's just been such a tragedy to lose that tribal knowledge and the culture. And I think that even though, AI is somewhat cold and heartless at times, that capturing culture can actually reshape how the output of whatever is being captured in AI. So I don't think it's so evil to be listening to conversations, to be recording how people are interacting with customers and really their own associates, that they might be managing, to try to capture the nuance of that individual. No, you're not going to get a perfect match, but you can capture some of this information. And there are companies working on that because this is something that is a big problem, as you just mentioned. And I see it in not only HVAC, but I mean, all vertical markets I work in, and really in most of the industries out there. But I see this as a huge challenge to capture that information.
Well, yeah, and it's the Wild West with AI right now,
Absolutely.
right? This is like
Absolutely.
the .com era revisited,
Yes.
really on steroids.
And I hope we don't bust. Oh, we're in trouble then. So
yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to see the decisions all
Yeah.
these companies make, who they choose to
Yeah.
partner with over the next several years, and then are those AI partners successful, right? Because 10 years from now,
Sure.
not all of them are going to be here. There
Oh,
will be
no,
some of
not
those
at all.
800-pound gorillas that emerge as, kind of the front
Yes.
runners, right? So
Yeah.
it's going to be very interesting. And I'm curious to hear, based on the example you just said, actually
Yes.
using AI to record these people that have so much tribal knowledge. Typically, those that are closer to retirement age are not what I would call digital natives, right? So
Right.
has
Right.
has that been a challenge in actually capturing some of that information or trying to find willing participants?
I suspect it is. I mean, again, I can only get so far under the covers with people. They're only going to tell me their secret sauce only so much. But I will say that they're trying to create ways to make it less invasive and to make it more comfortable. And I think that's really part of the equation there is it has to be on that person's terms as well. And so it's not going to be, the chip in the back of the head data dump, which would be lovely, but it is going to be a period of time. And so honestly, the earlier you start with a rock star, for example, somebody that you really appreciate who they are and how they come to an organization and how they perform on a regular basis, the sooner you can start imparting wisdom into some sort of data set, the better off that data is going to be eventually.
Completely agree. Yeah, it's something that I constantly think about and read all of the news articles, and it's going to change a lot over the next 5 to 10 years.
It is. And I think it's fascinating. I mean, you can fear it or you can embrace it. You got two choices, be curious or be scared. And I think I've really enjoyed, following people that are way smarter than I am, that are sharing this information and really sharing it because of the passion around it. Do they want to make money? Sure. Absolutely. Okay. There's an underlying, theme there, but they're very passionate about the problems that they want to solve for organizations. And so I look for those individuals who really tend to, have their, passion out there on their shirt sleeves and, okay, what are you really trying to do? And so it's been fun following some of those folks. I do attend, a lot of AI distribution conferences just because I love to see what's new out there. What are you all trying to dream up that I haven't even thought of yet?
Oh, absolutely. And I heard great things about Ian Heller and Jonathan Bain's Distribution Strategy Group AI Focus Conference. I haven't been able to attend due to, scheduling conflicts, but we do have some
Yes.
people attending, from our organization. I just hear phenomenal things about it.
It's fantastic. It's a fantastic conference.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's going to be not just who you partner with, but how you decide to deploy the technology.
Hmm.
So, we've talked a lot about disruption in the industry. This is another very disruptive
Yeah.
force that is going to change the landscape. And, I still have a long road ahead in my career. So I'm going to be sticking around for a lot of
Yeah.
this, and it's going to be very fascinating.
Yeah. It is. It's fascinating. I mean, I am constantly in awe. I mean, absolutely in awe. And I think that's really been, I'll be honest, it's kind of an energizer in my career. Because at times distribution can get very flat and stale and repetitive. And then things like this come in. It's like, wow, okay, what can I do now? So all of a sudden creativity comes in, and I would hope that the people in your organization and others, that they are trying to embrace the path of curiosity versus fear associated with this. And the more that we as leaders can encourage that path of curiosity, I just think that the folks are going to thrive. They get more excited about where their direction is. And yes, that would be a soapbox I like to hang out on as well.
Well, we can do that at the next industry conference where we run into each other. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, just even
absolutely.
thinking about the smaller distributors that we just talked about a little while ago, the
Yeah,
independents,
yeah,
that have to evolve with the times. AI is going to
yes,
give them the ability to create some significant differentiation if they use it right. They're nimble, so
yeah.
they can move like a little speedboat and become disruptive forces themselves based on how they leverage it.
100%. I mean, it's the democratization of data. I mean, it's really, it allows the small independents that you just talked about punch above their weight class. That is what and I champion that. I like smaller organizations. I like to see them thrive, and so anything I can do to help them, that is what I try to do. So, and it's exciting to watch that too. I like to see, privately held businesses. I like to see family businesses, privately held businesses thrive. It's exciting, because I think these types of organizations, no matter the size, they allow people that were tending bar behind, in a golf club, to really ascend through these organizations and to really reach heights that they probably never imagined. And so that is something that's always been attractive to me and slightly, romantic about it, that this is, that amazing journey that people can go on in these companies. And that's why I hope that continues. I really do.
I think it will.
So before I let you go, you had mentioned involvement in a lot of different, Hardy, you said Blue Hawk and other organizations. And you shared with me that you recently joined the board of Blue Hawk.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm 100% in favor of people. I believe that this is one of the best ways that you can get involved in the industry is to go into and be a part of these organizations. But why did you raise your hand? Tell me why you wanted to get involved, especially with Blue Hawk, which I highly respect.
Yeah. So great question. I had taken a step away from a lot of my industry involvement when I was in
Okay.
grad school and also pregnant with my second child, and everything was happening with COVID, and so I really needed to take a step back just because the bandwidth was totally maxed out.
For sure.
So when I took on this role, obviously needed to get my feet underneath me, get my family settled, 1,500 miles across the country, and
Yeah. Yeah.
establish that stability in a new environment, if you will. And now that I have that, I
Yeah.
really wanted to get involved again. So I was
Yeah.
on the Hardy Marketing Council. In fact, Lauren Roberts and I were founding members, however many years
Yeah.
ago.
I know Lauren really well. Yeah.
Love her and that whole family.
Yeah.
I had been involved in various, things with Hardy. And then with Blue Hawk, Lance had asked if it's something that I would be interested in. And this was
Hmm.
around the time that I had made a personal goal to get more involved again. So
Good.
I said, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Coming up in independent distribution, it's an area that, I share your passion, Jason.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think they do a phenomenal job for all of their members. So I was happy and honored to even be asked if I would raise my hand. So absolutely was happy to do it. And, it allows me to continue to advocate for distribution and ensuring, as we continue down this, AI driven path,
Yes.
that distribution does not get completely removed from the channel. I know that's a big concern for a lot of people with the advent of technology.
For sure.
And we provide so much value across numerous industries that I am passionate about making sure we are here to stay and cement our value position in that whole chain.
100%. Yeah. And again, and I love my Hardy people. They're great, but I think sometimes cooperatives can push that agenda a little bit harder. They tend to bind people a little in a different way than your trade association does. So huge fan of cooperatives, and call them buying groups, call them whatever you want, but I'm a huge fan of those types of organizations. So
they've done a lot for us, as independents and as an industry as a whole. It's done a lot to really help with that evolution and rising with the tide.
And I think one of the things that people, and I always try to reiterate this in when I'm interviewing, talking to someone who is involved, is I think there's a perception that you kind of have to be part of the club, or you have to be, some big prominent figure in order to be invited in to serve in these organizations. And I try to remind people that you just raise your hand and say, how can I help? And then that's your entree. I mean, that these places are dying for help, looking for that next person to say, I want to help.
Absolutely. And it takes a good mix of perspectives to have the most well-rounded decisions and outcomes. You've got to take the single location distributor and put them in the same room as the 50 location distributor and find that common ground, because there are shared struggles regardless of size, but also contributions you can make regardless of the size of your company. I mean, there's some very innovative things happening at much smaller companies.
I was on the board of directors for my trade association that I grew up in 23 years ago. So here I am, the youngest guy out. Yeah, I am the young kid on this board. But you're absolutely correct. It was a mix of single, multi-location organizations. Certainly different ages along this board. But it's just, I think that enriches the experience. And to this day, I have very close relationships with everyone I served with, during that time. And frankly, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if I had not raised my hand and said, yes, I'd like to be a part of that. So
yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it also, you touched on something, being the youngest one in the room. I think that's important. There's a lot of focus on talent in this industry, or lack thereof, getting people reinvigorated about the trades and the opportunities that this industry provides. So I feel very passionate about prioritizing that and saying that, you can be younger, you can be a woman, you can be whatever, and still have a seat at the table, because it demonstrates to that younger generation that there's opportunities for everyone, regardless of what it looks like today.
And I think that's something that's, it's been fascinating. If I look at all these, so I do work in a lot of distribution verticals, and the fastest growing subsection of each of those verticals is next gen and female. Those are the two subgroups in there that are the fastest growing, the most, most interesting, that well attended and whatnot. So I think it just speaks to your point right there. Is that these industries, we embrace both of those groups very heavily, and you start to see that in these organizations that you and I have both served in.
Yes, we are definitely seeing that reflected in the boards of a lot of these organizations. It's encouraging to see.
Nice. Well, Renata, I think I've taken enough of your time here, but I truly appreciate you sharing a little bit about your background and your passion. And I definitely am looking forward to getting up on a soapbox with you and discussing our data and AI love and where that should go in organizations. But once again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider sharing with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast application. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by the brilliant team at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, the Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com. This episode is brought to you by Connected Peers, an online peer collaboration platform for distribution professionals. Let's face it, most managers don't have the opportunity to speak with their industry peers about common challenges in their departments. Sure, they might see each other at an annual conference, but that hardly provides any real relationship building or continuity. What if there was a forum to solve challenges with those in your same role? Well, now there is. The concept is simple. Purchasing managers meeting with purchasing managers, training managers meeting with training managers, marketing managers meeting with marketing managers. You get the idea. There are 10 unique role-based communities to choose from. These are monthly, facilitated meetings all via Zoom. Ask questions and receive feedback from people who understand the challenges of your position. Isn't it time that you quit going it alone? To learn more and find your peers, visit us at www.connectedpeers.com.